Three, two, one.
Hello and welcome. Happy Saturday. Another episode of Fantasy Football Happy Hour podcast. We are going to be looking at the championship game previews today, but there is actually also some news with the Detroit Lions getting kind of knocked out of the playoffs last week against the Commanders. That seemed to open the floodgates for coaching moves. So before I dive into game previews, let's talk about the 5 coaches who have filled openings. They joined Mike Vrabel, who I talked about last week with the Patriots. That means 6 out of the 7 coaching openings are now full. The first domino to fall was Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He signed on with the Chicago Bears, will become the head coach there. Probably great news if you are holding Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore in fantasy. We'll have to see what happens with DeAndre Swift. Swift was part of the offensive attack for Johnson in Detroit, and they kind of quickly moved away from that and moved on from him. So is that a piece he's going to want to keep? That remains to be seen. Next domino was the other coordinator for the Lions, so they will lose their offense and defensive coordinator as Aaron Glenn, who played for the New York Jets, comes back to the New York Jets to be the head coach. Jets still don't have a GM locked in yet. Going to be interesting too. First questions up are going to be about Aaron Rodgers. That's a domino that then affects Devontae Adams and some others. Be curious to see how that goes, how he goes, what offensive scheme they want to bring in, what they want to do. Do they keep the offensive people that were already in place? Nathaniel Hackett technically still on the team, as is Todd Downing. They kind of ran the offense last year. If they stay with that offense, maybe they stay the course. So a lot of questions, but at least they found their man in Aaron Glenn. Probably the most interesting and contentious story all week involved Liam Coen, who took himself out of the running to be a head coach on Wednesday and seemingly got a huge pay raise and upgrade from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But that led the Jaguars to firing GM Trent Baalke, who maybe was a stumbling block in their coaching hiring search. And before Coen signed with the Buccaneers, he basically ghosted them, went back to the Jaguars, and ended up signing on to be their head coach. Some ruffled feathers in that Tampa Bay organization. Interesting, Coen comes in with 2 years of offensive coordinator experience. His offense was not great in 2022 in Los Angeles, but was pretty darn good with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and Bucky Irvin in Tampa Bay. So can he get the most out of Trevor Lawrence? They have a really great receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. They, to me, still have some question marks in the backfield. We have not seen Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby really thrive back there, but they have pieces. So he will begin building and assembling there. Jaguars also now still looking for a GM. I believe the Raiders were next up, and they were a team that were strongly linked to Ben Johnson, but when Johnson went with Chicago on Tuesday, it was time to pivot, and they end up signing a 3-year deal with a 4th-year option with former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll, a veteran coach, a different kind of coach, different kind of atmosphere. Be curious to see, the staff that he builds there, what pieces they want to put in place. The Raiders have a lot of questions, I think, on both sides of the ball, but we've seen him architect some great defenses, some good teams, obviously as a Super Bowl winning coach coming to the AFC West. So what will that do to enliven the Raiders? That'll be something fun to watch. Next up, the most recent of hires, probably kind of a surprising one, the Dallas Cowboys going with their current offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, who's never been a head coach, to be the head coach for this franchise. I have some questions. I want to let it settle in, see what kind of staff gets built around him, but certainly was probably not a choice that was highly talked about before this process. He ended up getting into the interviews after a few other names and interviews had been bandied about, then quickly a second interview, and started to gain traction this week, and now has become official. So that leaves the Saints as the only team that have yet to hire a head coach. There's been some names rumored and linked there. We've seen some other pieces come off the board. Robert Saleh, who had been an interviewee in this cycle, has agreed to become the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. Brian Flores is still out there. Vance Joseph. Some of these guys have interviewed with a few different teams. Still available. Mike McCarthy, who left the Dallas Cowboys, is still out there and available. So we will see who the Saints end up going with and settling on. Just that has been the job that has had probably the least amount of buzz through this offseason. And as we've seen, they are now the only ones sitting without a head coach. Well, that'll do it for news and notes. Let's get ready to talk some playoff football. Just 2 games this week, just 3 meaningful games left in this NFL season. We are to conference championship week, and the first of those that will take place at 3 Eastern tomorrow is the NFC Championship game, which features the 6th-seeded Washington Commanders. They outlasted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They beat up the Detroit Lions to get here, going against the 2nd-seeded Philadelphia Eagles, who are hosting the game in Philadelphia. The Eagles opened with a strong wild card weekend victory over the Green Bay Packers last week. They beat the Los Angeles Rams. Saquon Barkley continuing to run like a madman, had 205 yards last week. And to me, that's what it really comes down to. I know this picture is Jalen Hurts, who is expected to play, who they say is getting better all the time. The last time these two teams played, Hurts got knocked out with a concussion that caused him to miss a few games, and the Commanders were able to use that to come back with a 22-point fourth quarter and get a 36-33 victory. In their first meeting of the season, which was on Thursday Night Football, it was a 20-point fourth quarter from the Philadelphia Eagles that led to their victory, and they did that largely on the back of Saquon Barkley. And so I think this one really comes down to, can the Eagles bottle up and contain Jaden Daniels? And can the Commanders bottle up and contain Saquon Barkley? Those are the two engines that drive these offenses. I like the Eagles at home. I am taking them to advance to the Super Bowl and win the NFC Championship game. The AFC Championship game takes place at 6:30 Eastern Time. This one will be on CBS. Top 2 seeds in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills blasted the Broncos in the wild card round and were able to beat Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in the divisional round. The Kansas City Chiefs outlasting the Houston Texans in the divisional round to get here. The Chiefs will host at home. These two teams know each other well. They played each other in the regular season. The Buffalo Bills actually got that victory. It was the only regular season loss for the Chiefs, where Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones were playing and on the field. Denver beat the Chiefs in Week 18, but they were largely resting their starters. The Bills beat them at near full strength. The Chiefs didn't have Isaiah Pacheco in that one. They didn't have Hollywood Brown, who are back, but the Bills didn't have Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman, who figured to be back. This is really about Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and these two teams. In the regular season, the Buffalo Bills have had great success against the Kansas City Chiefs. In the playoffs, it has not been the same. The Chiefs are 3-0 against the Bills, and they have been some heartbreaking playoff losses for Buffalo fans, or for people who are just becoming Buffalo fans because they don't prefer Kansas City. I'm looking at myself. Can the Bills get over the hump? This has been a great year for them at times. Kansas City, obviously a great team that is playing for destiny, trying to win a 3rd Super Bowl in a row, something no one has ever done. I honestly believe whoever wins this AFC Championship game is likely to win the Super Bowl. I think these are probably the 2 best teams of the 4 teams that are left. I think this is going to be a great game. This is the matchup we wanted to see. Makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm hanging tough. I'm going with the Buffalo Bills, which, if my prediction comes true, it would be Eagles Bills in the Super Bowl. So, all you Commanders Chiefs fans, start making your plans now, because I probably cursed the two teams I picked. But we will see what happens tomorrow. I am hoping for a couple of great games. Both these teams know each other, should be fairly evenly matched, so it should be a lot of fun. That'll do it for me today. I will be back next week, probably talking my prediction for NFL Honors Awards. And then in 2 weeks, we have the Super Bowl, guys. How can you not get excited? Until then, have a great conference championship weekend.